right, welcome to podcast number, what are we up to now? 9, I think, with the amazing Matt Grant. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Ramsey.
All right, thank you for being here. Matt traveled all the way from the United States of America to be here in Shanghai, China for this podcast. And you might notice we're wearing some Jiu-Jitsu uniforms at this moment. We just got finished rolling. So you can see Matt has a purple belt around his waist. Matt, tell us a little bit about how you came to have that rank in Jiu-Jitsu and what brought you to this point.
I started Jiu-Jitsu when I was 51 years old.
51 years old.
My son-in-law was big into MMA. I'd wrestled in college.
Yeah.
And I have all daughters, but we have family wrestling contests. And so we'd always had them growing up. When I got son-in-laws, it became a little bit more competitive. And when my one son-in-law said he was going to start jiu-jitsu, I thought I better check it out because I didn't want him to have the upper hand on me. And then I saw, well, that's just like wrestling with grips. An old guy, you give me some grips, I can wrestle.
Oh, man, I was telling you about Michael, one of the wrestling coaches here, and the first time he put on the gi, he was like, wow, this is such a good table, because I guess that's what he called a frame, and I was like, table, what do you mean? And I realized, he's talking about like the frames and the grips and stuff, like, it's such a good table, and this is such a good table. And he took to the gi like a fish to water, like, man, just figured out techniques I didn't even think about doing with the gi, just instinctively. So,
it's definitely a great equalizer for the old guy.
Yeah. So Matt, one of the most common questions I get on my YouTube channel is, Ramsey, am I too old to start training? And Matt, again, you started when you were 51 years old?
51.
Wow. What would you say to those guys who are like 30, 40, even 50, or even older about that question? Are they too old to start training?
I don't think you're ever too old to start training. I dropped from 220 to 160 in a short time. I built back some muscle, so now I'm in the low 170s. And I've been able to keep the weight off I dropped all the weight within the first 6 months. Wow. And have kept all the weight off. I think sometimes it's easier to train when you're older because your life is a little bit more stabilized than when you were in your early 20s and maybe you're dating and maybe you're job hunting and you're upward mobile, trying to find your spot in the world. Yeah. You know, when you're in your 50s, you pretty much know where your spot is. You know, most of your kids can take care of themselves, and I think it's definitely a great sport for people who are older to train.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a lot of people stop by the gym who are young and like gifted athletically, but their mind is all over the place. They're doing all this other stuff that distracts them from training, and they don't always they don't often accomplish anything near what you have done so far in the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, Matt, you've got like stacks of medals and stuff from all these tournaments you've done. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm a competitor. The great thing about Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is that they have age categories.
Yeah.
So I don't have to fight the 20-year-olds. I get to fight the 50-year-olds. And you know, this year, and you think, well, how many old guys are doing it? Well, just 2 weeks ago, I competed at Master Worlds, and there was almost 6,000 competitors there. So from all over the world. Every year it's grown. This is my 4th year competing in Master Worlds, and it's at least doubled. I think the first year they might have had 12 mats. This year they had 24 mats that ran for 4 days to handle all the matches that they had.
Wow. Yeah, and man, those must be long tournaments.
But you know, the best thing, and it's funny, is there's a real camaraderie in the jiu-jitsu community. And on Facebook, I have a ton of friends.
Yeah.
I mean, people are coming up to me asking to take their picture with me, and not because I'm good or have any certain skill level. It's just because, you know, we're all nice guys. Everyone's a nice guy. And And, you go train with the young guys, and they have respect for you because you're out there, trying your best and doing it. I had a friend who who goes to the gym a lot, kind of a power lifter type. And he told me that after doing jiu-jitsu, he went back to the gym, and he says, it was weird. He says, no one said, great to see you. Nobody gave him a high five. No one, os.
It's like one of those normal weights and treadmills gyms, right?
Just like LA Fitness or,
oh yeah,
or whatever
knows your name there, man.
24-hour, whatever those are. You just go in, you have on your blinders, you do your thing, you leave, you might see someone the same day for 6 months and never know their name.
Yeah.
There's a camaraderie in jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the guys, especially the older guys, are ex-military. They're guys that took the route out of high school or college to go straight into the military. They were able to retire after 30 years. So now they're 50 years old. They got their retirement. And, it's a lot of them are pilots. A lot of them are, it's funny, but they talk about the camaraderie in jiu-jitsu being very similar to the camaraderie that they feel when they were in their armed forces.
Yeah. Man, so before the podcast, you showed me this picture of one of the guys you competed against in this Masters division. And this dude was how old? Like 60?
60 years old.
60 years old, and built like a just shredded bodybuilder type of physique.
You'd think you'd see him at 2 o'clock in the morning on some infomercial selling something. But man, the guy, yeah. I mean, and it's amazing because every year, I think I'm getting better.
Yeah.
But every year, the people I'm competing with are getting better.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, where are these people coming from? How come all these old people are getting better at doing jiu-jitsu? How come I can't get ahead?
I think there's definitely a misunderstanding, especially with younger people. They just assume that when you get older, you're going to deteriorate into dust long before you die. I mean, I'm 40 now, just turned 40. I had my 40th birthday, and for my birthday, I went to the gym and I did a Shark Tank. I sparred with all my students, just one after the other, and man, some of them were getting tired before I was, and I'm like, man, you're half my age. What's going on? And they're looking at me like, he's not human. What's this guy's deal? I thought he was old, and
yeah, 40 was a funny birthday because people are bringing you black balloons and people are bringing you all this stuff that makes it seem like pretty much it's your funeral because you turned 40.
I know, right?
And now, I'm 57, and I look back and think, man, if I could just feel like I did when I was 40, just think how great that would be.
I know, right? There was a statistic I read a few years ago which kind of blew my mind. It said something along the lines of that the peak levels of human strength are achievable between the ages of 35 and 50. And I thought, what? That's like the age that most people start winding down and losing their strength and withering away, right? But
I remember I worked for the railroad when I was young, when I was in my early 20s, and I worked on a rail gang, and we would drive spikes. This was back when they laid the rail and we had to put the spikes in the ties. And so you'd have your spike maul, and I was pretty fit. I wrestled. I was pretty strong. Yeah. And there was some older gentlemen, and of course I was in my early 20s, so they might have been 35, but they just, maybe they were 40. And those guys could work us into the ground. There was like 3 or 4 of us young guys, and after a couple hours, we were done. And these guys throwing that spike maul, one, they hit the spike every time. That helped. But I don't know.
Technique cannot be underestimated.
It was just something that I couldn't figure out. And now being an older guy, I think I can understand what was going on there. But as a early 20-something, I had no idea.
Yeah. you mind if we take off the
I
gi
think-
tops? I'm getting a little...
It's warming up in here.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, that reminds me, I don't know if I told you this story about this this Tai Chi master that I met. The guy was 80 years old, and he was super fit. I met him up in Jiangsu province, and I was up there training at a Sanda camp, with a bunch of Chinese Sanda fighters, and a lot of these guys were very decorated in tournaments and whatnot, and their coach was a former national champion. And on the last day, the coach said, "We're going to train with my Tai Chi master." And I thought, okay, that'll be a nice, relaxing way to finish the thing. And we went there, and he's this fairly small guy, 80 years old, and he's doing some forms and stuff, and he sees me. He's like, "Come here," and he wants to spar. And I'm thinking like pushing hands, but no, he means like spar, like fight, kick, punch, wrestle, all this stuff. And I found out in the most pragmatic way, Tai Chi Twin is a grappling art. The guy grabs me and wrist locks me and throws me and sweeps my leg and does all this stuff. I'm like, I can't touch this guy. What's going on? And it was just such a high level of understanding of technique and whatnot. And it didn't really make sense to me back then. But 10 years later, a lot of that makes sense. I realize experience, if you can keep up a certain level of physical fitness, that experience is invaluable in fighting. So
I think that's, the first time you told this story, I thought there was going to be some punchline at the end, like those like those videos you see of the guy running towards the guy and then putting out his hand and the guy falling over and those videos. I was thinking,
like
the first time I heard
no-touch knockout masters.
The first time I thought, but.
Yeah, I thought it would be something like that before he actually laid hands on me.
The key is like you said, the technique works, but you have to keep yourself at some sort of fitness level.
Yeah.
Because if you're not at that, at least some degree of a fitness level.
Yeah.
Then experience.
That doesn't do you much good if you can't move your body.
Right. I mean, think about professional athletes. They have a lot of experience. But the fitness level that they're at, it just can't be maintained to continue to perform at the level they did when they were younger. And I think that's why old people get that bad rap. Because they see these super athletes that have to hang it up, but they don't understand that the people they're competing against are also super athletes.
Yeah. Oh man, absolutely. It's what was I going to say? This old man. Probably what shocked me more than the fact that I kind of got beat up a little bit by an older guy is how physically fit he was. Like after we sparred, he started doing a kung fu demo form, and then he starts doing backflips, and then he lifts his leg up over his head in the splits and holds it there, and just shows off this amazing flexibility and dexterity. Stuff that I couldn't physically do at the time. And it's like, how physically fit is this guy? And I asked him about his regimen, like, what do you do? How are you this fit at this age? And he basically said, I train for an hour every day from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I have done that every day, every month, year after year after year. So, man, the power of consistency is tremendous. So, Matt, what kind of advice might you give to these guys who are older and they want to get into sport like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but they're feeling doubts. They're feeling like, I don't want to go, or I might get smashed by these young kids. Or what would you say to them?
I think I've seen a lot of older people come and go.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been a long time, just 6 years, but I've seen a lot of older people come and go, and usually what happens is they get injured.
Yeah.
And the reason they get injured is because their mind is still telling them to do things that 20-year-olds do. And their body doesn't respond. So I think that to be long in the sport, you have to take it slow in the beginning. I just think you have to build into it. The reason I lost 60 pounds in 6 months is because it was just so physically exhausting.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, we just rolled for what, 45 minutes, an hour?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I was hardly breathing hard. If I'm not going to lose 60 pounds now because I'm not using as much effort as I did then.
Yeah, that's one thing I notice about the way you do jiu-jitsu, the way you grapple. You're super efficient in your motion. You're not wasting any energy.
And that's where the new guys, that's the problem. Their ego wants them to win or to do something that their body is just not prepared to do. And now, 6 years in, my body's prepared to do those things. So I can do that. But if I tried to do what I'm doing now when I just started, I'd have been injured. And, I know guys with knees and shoulders and backs and, head, shoulders, knees and toes, the whole song, everything. And so, and then, they get home and their wife's like, "What are you, stupid? Why are you doing this to yourself? Did you look at your birth date? Do you know how old you are?" Sometimes they're not getting a lot of support at home, and so it's just easier for them. But anybody I know that stuck with it loves it. It's a great sport, and nothing but good things to say. And I can tell you stories of guys who've lost a lot more weight than me and are competing at a same high level as me, that are old, that are in their 60s, that didn't start till they were in their late 50s. And I mean, these guys are amazing, and they just had to get through that first 6 months. I think even as a young guy, you have to get through that first 6 months. That first 6 months,
definitely the hardest.
That's when you're going to get beat up. That's when, I taught a class, maybe 3 weeks ago. And the first thing I told the people, and I'm a little out of the box. I'm not your normal, I don't have the normal thought pattern when it comes to a lot of things. The first thing, when you're a white belt, and you see a new white belt come in, this is not a chance for you to go beat up somebody because you've been getting beat up for the last 3 months. It's like, woohoo, a new white belt.
They see a target on his back.
Oh my gosh, 140 pounds. I can whip this guy. That might be a time, during the rolls to work on some technique that you need to work on. I said, when you're going against someone like maybe a female that hasn't had a lot of experience, that you're just, you can physically dominate them, and because your experience level is at a higher level, it's, the job for you, and there's a lot of people that disagree. Some people think, I got beat up when I started, and I'm going to beat people up when they start.
Yeah, but some of the most prolific coaches in the sport actually recommend doing basically what you just said. Like, for example, John Danaher, Faraz Zahabi, they say if you want to improve your technique, basically roll with the new guys, roll with the less experienced people that you can handle however you want, except instead of squishing them, take that opportunity to learn new things. And that's such a brilliant thing. If you look at like almost any jiu-jitsu school, look at the coach. The coach is almost always the best guy on the mat. I mean, he knows all this stuff. He's super technical, and people are like, wow, he's a wizard. How did he get this good? And what do the coaches do? They teach brand new students all the time. They teach beginners all the time. They teach intermediate students how to get better all the time. And so they have all of this experience, basically learning new stuff and trying new stuff and developing in ways that you don't get just smashing each other.
Right. That's funny, because that's absolutely 100% correct. It's, when you start and you roll with the coach, you think, oh, he's just a little bit better than me. And you're a 1 and he's a 2. And then you improve to be a 2, and now all of a sudden he's a 3. And then all of a sudden you're now a 5 and he's a 6. It's like, because they know where they need to be just enough to keep you humble. I mean, they have no problems triangling me and, choking me and making sure I don't stick my head out and get guillotined, and they're teaching me my bad mistakes every day in practice.
Oh yeah.
But they're not doing it in a mean way. They're not doing it in a like a derogatory where they're trying to alpha male show the this is my gym. I need if you come in here you need to be submissive to the alpha male. It's not like that.
Yeah.
They just want you to learn, and they know as long as they stay a little bit ahead, you'll continue to learn.
That's fantastic.
But they don't let you beat them.
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot as a coach. Like you met Karen today. She's this tiny Chinese girl. She's been training for just a couple of weeks, and she really pays attention and tries very hard to make her technique perfect and correct and whatnot. And so something I think about sometimes. Sometimes I'll be training, I'll be rolling with somebody like that, and if they put themselves in a position where they're doing it technically correctly, and I'm strong enough to muscle out of it, sometimes I'll let them have it, and sometimes I'll let them know, okay, this is what happens when you roll with somebody bigger and stronger. But at the same time, I wonder sometimes what is the most effective way to teach somebody in that situation? Let them have it, or teach them the pragmatic reality of fighting somebody bigger and stronger. What do you think?
I could tell that today Karen really, like you said, she's only been training a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And her best technique is probably the rear naked choke.
Yes.
Okay? And so I showed her a few ways to get to the back.
Yeah.
And I might have only been like 20% resistant. But she knew that I was letting her do it.
Yeah.
So she got to the back, because when she put it on, she didn't apply it with force and wait for me to tap. She just put it on, and it was kind of catch and release.
Yeah.
And then we started over. And so my feeling is if you're rolling with somebody and you're letting them get a move, and if they're all of a sudden going to really try to crank it, or they think they don't understand that you kind of let them have it, that they really, oh man, this purple belt, he sucks. He's like, look, this is his oldness. It's like, and so you don't have to tell them, I let you have that.
Oh, that just sounds needy.
Yeah, just the next time, when they go do the same move, you throw them on their head and do something, and then all of a sudden they start to think, maybe he let me have that. I don't know. For me, that's just me. It's maybe that's a little ego thing, but that's just me. I
throw them on their head gently, of course.
I let them have. I let new people have moves all the time, until they think they're better.
Yeah.
And then I try to stay just like the professor, one step ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh man. So you in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you were fairly highly ranked in what was it, the IBJJF roster?
Yes.
What were you ranked
I was
at?
As a blue belt.
Yeah.
For Masters 5, which is over 50, I was ranked number 1.
Oh wow.
And it crosses all weight classes. And then as a purple belt right now, I'm ranked number 3. And I haven't been a purple belt. I've only been a purple belt since December. And the guy who's number 1, I've actually beaten twice. But the thing is, the rankings don't really mean anything. They're kind of one of those. They're fun to tell people and show people.
I'm number 1.
They kind of give me a hard time at the academy that I train at. Oh, champion, number one. But they all know that it just because they give you points for competing.
Yeah.
And so if you only compete once a year, of course you get more points for competing in bigger tournaments. But if you only compete once a year, it's going to be difficult to get enough points to really be highly ranked. Yeah. And there's some divisions that there's guys like this weekend is the Asian Open in Tokyo. I have friends from the USA that are flying over there to compete. They're going to earn points, and they went to European championships. They're all ranked very high, even though they don't. Well, and they win. Yeah. I don't want to take anything away from them as far as that goes. But it doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm saying this for my own personal self, being ranked number 1 doesn't mean that I'm the best blue belt over 50 in the world. It just means that I've been to more tournaments and scored more points than any other blue belt over 50 in the world.
Kind of sounds like you're a big deal either way, man.
I don't know about that.
No, seriously though, Matt has good jiu-jitsu technique. I know one of the big paradoxes about martial arts is generally the better a martial artist somebody is, the more humble they tend to be about it. And the opposite seems to also be true. The worse somebody is at fighting, the more they talk themselves up. And I'll see this a lot on like YouTube comments. Like anytime I make a video about martial arts, which is all the time, I'll get some very long, almost like here's my resume of street fighting. I don't care. Most of that's probably not real anyway. If it was, why would you brag about it?
Yeah, I question that also, and not because of they're all talk or the best guys are humble, because I don't know if that's true or not. I think that but on Facebook before these big tournaments, I see a lot of people in my age group that are chest pounders. They're out there. They're and all their friends are egging them on, and these guys are like in their 50s, right? Yeah. And all their friends, I'm not gonna mention any names.
It's fun, right? It's fun.
Oh, so and so, you're gonna kill him. Yeah, no one can touch you. And he's like, I'm going to Vegas. They post a picture of, I'm bringing home the gold. Yeah. I cannot be denied. So and I'm like, okay. So you're the guy I have my first match with, and I'm trying to think I've always wondered this.
Yeah.
From a pump yourself up mental aspect.
Yeah.
Is that why they're doing it? What I don't really understand. I don't really understand why they promote themselves so much. In fact, I know a brown belt that I also won't mention a name, just in case anybody watches your podcast.
Man, I've learned people that I didn't even know about watch my podcast, and sometimes it gets back to me.
There's a lot of guys in our age group that don't like this particular person as a lower belt. He's a brown belt now, and he's a little bit younger than me. Just so the people who I compete with know I'm not talking about any of them. Yeah. But he really did promote himself. He was, and people there were people that were looking to just take him down. Yeah. And he did okay in the tournaments. I mean, he wasn't bad, but he really, but you know what? And that was mostly as a blue belt and a newer purple belt. But now, as a brown belt, he seems to have calmed down his persona quite a bit. Yeah. And so he's much more palatable to talk to at tournaments than he was before.
Yeah, I'm not a really naturally competitive person. Like if I win something, all right, cool. If I lose something, better luck next time kind of deal. And that's always how I've been. But I notice a lot of people into sports, especially combat sports, are just super competitive. And when I started fighting, I think in a way it held me back because I wasn't like super competitive. I was like, if I lose, I lose, whatever. If I win, yay. But yeah, Matt, I don't know if this is accurate, but you don't strike me as the kind of, like you were describing, chest pounding guy who's like super competitive until you get on the mat. And then I watch you move. Like you sent me some videos from the Master Worlds the other day, and I was watching. I was like, Matt doesn't strike me as a super competitive person off the mat, but on the mat, yeah, he's a shark. He just goes out there and goes out there to win.
You know, I talk to a lot of the people, and I fight till the end of the match.
Yeah.
I always think I have a chance, and I've won a lot of my matches at the end because I have a good mentality when it comes to that. And one of the guys I was talking to in the bullpen, he says, I don't really care if I win. I says, yes, you do. I says, everybody wants to win. I says, the problem is not, because everybody wants to win.
Yeah.
I says, the problem is how do you act when you lose? Because really,
oh, yes.
I fought the guy. This was in actually the championship of the open weight class at Pan American Championships. And afterwards we shook hands and gave each other a hug, and I came out on top, and he said, you're right, it's funner to win. But you know what? Afterwards, I mean, we're good friends. And all the guys I compete with were good friends. And, one of the things, my daughters all swim.
Yeah.
At a pretty high level. And one of the things that drives us crazy is their competitors that are only nice to you when they beat you. But when you beat them, when my daughters touch the ball first, the parents, storm off, and the kids, don't react. In fact, right before Master Worlds, the IBJJF, and this could be a hoax. I'm just prefacing this. This could be a hoax. It came out with a thing saying that they want to put a new rule in. And the rule is that if you don't win, you have to still, if you don't win the championship, if you're first, second, or third, you still have to stand on the podium and honor or respect the champion. Because it got to the point where a lot of people were such sore losers that they would win, or they would get beat.
Oh yeah, I've seen this.
And then they would just go home. They wouldn't even show up. They wouldn't even get on the podium.
Yeah,
so
I've
now
seen
you
this.
have a podium with, instead of 4 people on it, 2 people on it, because 2 of the people, weren't happy. And they're talking about having in this article, it was a 1-year suspension if you do not show up to the podium.
Suspension, wow.
And then people were making comments like, well, what if they have a flight to catch? And the guy says, well, if he won, would he have made it? Would he have stood on the podium and got his medal even though he had a flight to catch?
You think he would have scheduled his flight around the tournament, right?
I mean, come on, But I think there's no place for that poor sportsmanship. I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you.
No. That happened to me the very first time I competed in a jiu-jitsu tournament where I won 2 gold medals in my weight class in open weight. I was so proud of that. And I stood on the podium, and the guy who got the bronze medal refused to stand on the podium. And so all my pictures of the tournament were just me and the silver medalist. So I posted the pictures on social media, and my friends were like, there were only 2 guys in the division. I was like, no. It was like a full bracket, and there's just 2 guys. Lame. I was like, no, you don't understand. It was the bronze medalist. It's his fault,
Well, I just think, you know what? You and the guys that pound their chest the hardest are the guys that have the most difficulty with getting beat. I mean, that's just from my small, narrow window of experience.
Yeah, indeed. Man, reminds me, like I said, I'm not a super competitive person, but I am pretty good at figuring out how to win. And that's what I do for a living. I train people to win fights specifically. And I learned I've got a knack for figuring out how to do that, figuring out the strategy behind it and all that. And I remember years ago, I was dating this girl before I met my wife, and she invited me home, and her brother was there, and they wanted to play this board game I'd never heard of. I don't even remember what it was, and it was like their big family board game that they all loved, and her brother was super competitive in a very negative way. And it was the first time I'm playing this game, and I figure out the strategy. I'm like, oh, that's not too hard. And I beat the guy like 3 times in a row. He gets so mad, just like throws all the pieces all over. And he's older than me, too. And just like terrible sportsmanship. I'm like, man, this is very uncomfortable to be here. No, nobody likes that.
It wasn't my brother, was it?
Is that how he is?
No, actually, I'm from a really super competitive family. My family and my wife and kids, my wife is much more competitive than I am. I mean, it's to the point where we have to outlaw certain games because it always ends up with somebody in tears.
Yeah. I'm tempted to say something about my wife right now because she loves to win, but I will hold back because I know she's going to be watching this. And I'm probably already in trouble right now just for saying that. I love you, Vanessa.
My wife's proud of her competitiveness.
Yeah?
Yes, she is.
Okay, good for her.
When people come up to me and say, wow, your kids, very competitive and this and that, they says, wait, they must have got that competitive spirit from you. I says, nope, got it from my wife.
Yeah.
It's funny because my wife's very competitive and she really likes to win, and the kids are like that. But I usually watch the grandkids when they start playing games because sometimes it's the killer instinct. I just don't want the killer instinct to come out with family.
And I've really been trying to understand the psychology of how this competitive nature forms. And I think it starts at an early age, and I think that because of just watching my kids, one's 3, one's 6, and a few days ago we were racing. We were at their school on the playground, and they wanted to race me, and so I let them win because it's fun for them to outrun their dad. But when they raced each other, the older one is bigger and has longer legs, and she's faster. And she overtook the younger one, and the younger one immediately just stopped running and started to cry. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, essentially, that her sister was beating her, and so she had decided it wasn't worth it to continue. And I was like trying to talk my daughter into, it's if you don't race, then what's the fun in that and all that? And I don't want to say that winning doesn't matter because, of course it matters. But at the same time, there's so much value in just getting out there and competing, regardless of the outcome, and that's a value I wanted to instill in her. So,
I think competition is good.
Yeah.
And I don't. You didn't come right out and say this, but I agree with you if your stance is that there is such a thing as being too competitive. When Tanya Harding hits Nancy Kerrigan in the knees, that was too competitive. That's not even a fine line. That's a really big line.
Indeed.
So when Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear, that was probably over the top.
That was a bit much, Mr. Tyson.
as far as competitive goes, okay. And it's the heat of competition, and but. You know what? I do think, because I have a lot of parents come up to me and they say, and their kids are good swimmers. And they're like, well, how do you get your kids to be so competitive? And I have one daughter that's the one that it was the Hong Kong national team, who's super, super competitive. I mean, as a stupid dad, we belonged to a little country club that didn't heat the pool in the winter. And we were in Southern California, so it's not really cold, but it's cold enough. And so I put my 2 daughters, they were that age, they were like 10 and 8 in the pool.
Yeah.
And I said, just swim laps. And they says, how long do you swim? And I says, whatever one of you swims the longest, I'll give $10 to. And so they went out there, and the water was freezing. They were turning blue, and they wouldn't get out of the pool because they both, maybe that's greed, not competition.
Oh, yeah.
But
there were stakes.
But they were just, and finally, I said, listen, get out. I'll give you both 5. And the one said, no, I want to go for the whole 10. It's like, no, just get out. Your mom's going to kill me when we get home. But, so I think there is something about that competition, but I think it's important to compete. Yeah. And I think it's important to compete because it gives you focus. I've mentioned a few times that I lost a bunch of weight. And the reason I keep off the weight is because I compete. I have a weight class that I have to make. And why do I go to jiu-jitsu practice, 5 or 6 days a week?
Yeah.
It's because I compete. I have focus.
And you train like twice a day most days, right?
No, some days.
Some days.
My body doesn't really allow it to do that as often as I'd like to. But I think if you don't compete, it's like, you're in school, you're learning, math, and the teacher gets up and says, "Here's our book," and everybody's. I think I just hit this. Did something happen?
Oh, I think we're getting some interference from a phone.
Oh.
Hold on, it's my wife. Having a conversation with my wife on the podcast. All right. Hello. Oh, I'm in the middle of doing a podcast with Matt. I thought we were leaving at 6. Oh, it starts at 6. Oh, I thought we were leaving at 6. We may have to cut this a little short.
I think we're okay with short.
Okay. Well, let me finish up here and. Awesome. I'll meet you there. Send me the address and I'll meet up with you. Bye. All right.
Anyway, what I was going to say was, if you were in math class and the teacher said, I'm going to give out the grade at the end of the year based on something that you didn't have to be tested for, just on, I'm going to give it out, just based on how nice you look when you come to school.
Yeah.
Then you come to school every day looking nice, and at the end of the year, you get an A, but did you learn any math? Probably not. And the teacher taught math every day, but you weren't tested. The only reason kids study is because they're tested. On the swim team, we require every child to enter a swim meet at least once every 3 months.
Yeah.
Because if they're just swimming back and forth, they're not going to push themselves. They're not going to get better because they don't have that competition aspect. And so, and for some people, the anxiety is just tremendous. I understand that. And for some people, it's just too much. Even for me, I drive up to Master Worlds at Vegas and I'm like, why did I sign up for this again? What am I doing to myself? I'm 57 years old. Do I really need to have this, oh my gosh, I'm going to compete in this tournament anxiety? But the thing is it helps you during training. You train better when you're training for something, and it helps you get out of that comfort zone. And I think everybody who is a student of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should try to be focused on a tournament, even if that tournament's a year from now.
Yeah.
They focus on I'm going to make this weight class. These are the type of move sets I want to use, and I just think the focus really helps.
Yeah, and absolutely. And something I do every once in a while, when I find I train with my students, and sometimes they look at me like, "Oh man, he's this untouchable coach. He's so much better than me. I'll never." And I don't like that. I like my students to try to compete with me, and so when I see them fall into that rut, I'll pull out a pair of like brand new MMA gloves or boxing gloves or something like that, and I'll say, "All right, first person to tap me out gets a free pair of gloves," and suddenly their eyes light up, and suddenly they get really competitive. And suddenly they stop seeing me as this untouchable, unbeatable guy, and they try to break my arms and strangle me.
Now
and it's a whole different dynamic on the mat because there are stakes.
You become a path to MMA gloves.
Yes, exactly. Because again, they have that goal, they have that focus. And similarly, like you remember Karen, right?
Yes.
Tiny Chinese girl. and she's super focused, and I'll tell you why. I had a conversation with her shortly after she joined the class and asked her, well, why did she join the class? And she told me she ended up getting in a fight, and she didn't know what to do, and so she signed up for this class to learn how to fight, and it made so much sense. Like, that's why you pay attention. That's why you're motivated, because I got into martial arts for the same reason, because I got beaten up when I was a kid, and I was like, man, my motivation is so I can fight the bullies or whatever. But, man, people who sign up because it might be kind of neat or it might be fun or whatever.
Or even to lose weight. I
Yeah.
mean, lose weight. There's so many people trying to lose weight. If that's why you're signing up, then you need a motivation. And you're right.
Yeah.
If that's to not get beat up, because there's a bully down the street, then that's a good motivation. If competing is your motivation, that's a good motivation.
Yeah.
Something that's a little bit more attainable.
Indeed, there's no wrong reason to push yourself to excellence. But, man, you got to have that reason.
So what time is are you going to dinner tonight?
Yes. So I think hour-long podcast, that gives us 15 more minutes.
Yeah, I never listen to the second hour anyway. It's too long.
Yeah, I think probably like 3 or 4 people on YouTube sometimes comment on what we discussed in like the second hour. Most people are like, yeah, I'm done.
I mean, I always start out with good intentions, but then and then all of a sudden it's like, I got to go do this, I got to do that. I'll try to pick it up where I stopped later, and then I just usually go to the next one.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could get him on the airplane. That's a long flight back to
That would
US.
be great.
I'm going to have to figure out how to download it so I can listen to one of your podcasts. And so, when you're sitting there as a captive audience on an airplane, that'd be a good opportunity.
Yeah, man. Podcasts are kind of weird, especially when you have these different guests, and especially if you're listening to like celebrity type podcasts and you're like, oh, that guy sounds like he would be really interesting. And then it turns out like that guy wasn't really that interesting. But yeah, one thing I'm trying to do with my podcast is just interview people that I personally think are interesting and fun to talk to. And you are one of those guys, Matt. You are one of those guys.
Anyway, I was thinking when you said that about famous people, about Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony Bourdain competed in Jiu-Jitsu, and he was my age group and my weight class. And we actually, I have some friends that trained with him in New York, and we actually had conversations through these friends about having some type of a match,
Yeah.
I didn't get to he signed up for a couple of tournaments. I know he won the New York Open one year.
Yeah.
And he won, and he lost one of them. He took second in one. We've competed against similar people, but we just never ended up at the same tournament. And now, because of what happened, we'll never get that opportunity. But I always was told that he was quite a gentleman on the mats.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to what we were talking about before about injuries when we start out training, and this is something I see a lot with all age groups. Like when people start out, how to put this, when people start learning jiu-jitsu, a lot of the time they try to force square holes through round pegs. They try to phase through solid objects and muscle into these positions where it just simply won't work because they don't understand the spatial relationships and where to put their arms and feet and what underhooks are and that sort of thing. Just the other day I was sparring with a friend of mine, and he lifts weights. He's a power lifter. He's a very strong guy, and every time he's come into my jiu-jitsu class, just a few times, he ends up leaving injured. And it's not because he has any, he's a fairly young guy. He's fit. He's super strong. But why is he leaving injured? Well, because he's, again, trying to force that square peg through the round hole. So
I experienced that also.
yeah,
And I think that some of those people are too tense. And I think that because there's a few of those guys that I spar with, and they don't always get injured, but they just seem to get injured at a higher level.
yeah,
And I kind of relate it to how you know how whenever there's a drunk driving accident,
yeah.
the drunk usually never gets hurt because his body is
Oh, because he's so
loose and this and that, so he's able to flow through the accident. But the other people, stiffen up, and then that's when the more tragic results happen. I know I sound like a tragedy guy today talking about these tragic results, but I think there really is something to say, and that's where I think experience helps, because I think there really is something to say about being able to keep yourself relaxed and loose and not tense while you're doing jiu-jitsu will help you avoid those injuries. Most of the injuries, especially in the early stages for me, came because of that tenseness. It's like they learn break falls in judo.
Yeah.
And that break fall is basically learning to relax your body when it hits the ground, and correct me if I'm wrong, but relax your body so that you don't tense up and pop a hamstring or something.
It's finding the balance between tensing up at the right moments and relaxing at the right moments, and tensing and relaxing, tensing and relaxing. But when you start out, you don't know when to do that. You don't know when it's okay to relax, because if you relax too much, they pass your guard and squish you. And if you're too tense, you're likely to get injured and whatnot. So it's really about finding that balance.
You always hear the coaches tell the people, breathe, breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe. And so when I started,
Beginners always forget to breathe.
And they're saying, breathe, breathe, breathe. I'm like, but I think that
They think they are, but they're not.
Right. That comes with the, when you're not, you're tense. That's why you're not breathing. If you were relaxed, you'd be breathing.
Yeah. Man, it's shocking how many people forget to breathe when they're stressed. And there is such an important connection between breath and movement. And this is something that I learned studying dance back in college. I got a degree in modern dance. But the connection between breath and movement is vital. We will move the way we breathe, and we will breathe the way we move. They are intrinsically connected. And that carries over into jiu-jitsu and every combat sport. It's really noticeable in the striking arts, where you hear those guys like hissing, making those sounds when they punch. They're breathing like a punch, and so they're able to move that way. And by breathe, I mean exhale, like really focus on the exhaling.
Like some of those tennis players.
Yeah, exactly. Like Venus and Serena Williams when they shout when they hit the ball. Yeah, it's breathing the way they want to move. But in jiu-jitsu, it's a little more abstract because we're not making those percussive movements most of the time, and so it's easier to forget to breathe. And beginners tend to gas out a lot. They think, "What's wrong? Am I not jogging enough?" It's just, no, you're just not breathing.
Yeah, that breathing's important.
Yeah. So that brings me to another point. Because of that, a lot of people, I think, in my opinion, mistakenly believe that using strength in jiu-jitsu is bad or wrong, or flexing your muscles in jiu-jitsu is bad or wrong, because their coaches are constantly telling them to relax. And I would say it's a disservice to say relax means never flex a muscle or never use athletic attributes. What would you think about that, Matt?
Jiu-jitsu has the reputation, because of Helio Gracie.
Yeah.
Is that it's the way for a small man to beat a big man. And I think that's correct, unless the big man knows jiu-jitsu also. And then it's not correct. And so I think, when everybody I compete with, they're all beasts. They're all super strong. Everybody, and so you have to be strong. You're not going to win unless you're strong. Yeah. Physically, you need to be strong. Does that, You know,
it's a sport. You got to be an athlete to play a
here's kind
sport.
of a little. I coached a pee wee wrestling team.
Yeah.
Pretty much first through sixth grade, and then I coached some of them in junior high, up in Utah.
Yeah.
And this was back, when I was in college, and some of these kids, they were farm boys. They were the ones that were, picking up the baby calf and taking him out, so you could get milk. I mean, these carrying 2 buckets of milk, one each, and these were like 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. These are strong little kids. These are kids that have muscles and pecs and, And so the thing is so we'd go to these wrestling tournaments on the weekends, and these little guys, 8-year-old, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, that was about the age 10. Up to about 10, the strongest kid always won. But all of a sudden, when they started to get about 11 or 12, the kids that had been getting beat by these kids, it flipped on them. Yeah. And those kids started winning. And the kids that were strong didn't. And if you've ever coached kids in the U.S., you know that parents are idiots.
I have.
And so you know that parents are idiots. And so the thing is so they come up and say, my little Johnny won the state championship as a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, and a 5th grader. And he's better than Terry. How come Terry beat him? And I said, because when little Johnny was picking up and throwing little Terry around, little Terry was working on his moves, was working on his technique. And now, lo and behold, little Terry got some muscles last summer. And now that even though little Johnny is still stronger, little Terry now has enough muscles to beat him. And so the muscles are important. You need the muscles to win. But and it's a hard pill for parents to swallow. And it's almost a disservice because you see it even in swimming. Kids that have poor technique, but they're just stronger than everybody. And they win when they're small. But when they get bigger, because they just relied on their strength so much when they're small and didn't rely at all on their technique, now when they get bigger, they have too many bad habits. Their technique, it's too hard to relearn something. They have to relearn their whole muscle memory.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. I had this student, this big, strong, super strong guy once, and man, it was challenging teaching him sometimes because he was so strong. He could just literally just pry himself out of any hold or whatever, just like flick people off him with his fingers and flex his neck, and people just go flying. And I thought, man, I tried to tell him, like, just imagine you're fighting someone just as strong as you. What do you do in that scenario? And but yeah, it's hard to visualize that unless you actually are in that scenario.
The good thing about jiu-jitsu is because there's no striking, you don't have to worry about a big, strong guy like that hitting you and knocking you out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a larger margin for error.
Right? So usually when I go against a big, strong guy, I will I would really try to use theirs, especially if their technique's really poor. I'll try to use their technique against them. And I can do that a lot by using the lapel. You know how I roll.
That's crazy good with the grips. Like we were rolling earlier today, and he had like 3 grips with one hand. He had like the lapel and the sleeve and the pant leg, and it's like, how are you doing that, Matt? Your hands are smaller than mine. And I don't know, he just can.
I think you can control a lot of the people. And so what you can do is get them, it's still going to be hard to choke a guy with the neck like that. But you're going to be able to get them into a position that you're going to be able to take care of business and let them know that they need to work on some technique.
Yeah. Man, I tell you what, there are some behemoths out there, some behemoths with scary amounts of strength, and man, when you step on the mat with those guys, you just, whew. It's You need two of them. You need two of them and pit them against each other so they cancel each other out. And then
Or let the just keep pushing them. Let the lactic acid build up in their muscles, and when their muscles turn to stone, just push them over.
yeah, that works too. That works too. Oh man. Let's see. I had another question from another subscriber who was asking me about jiu-jitsu competition. He said he's started training in jiu-jitsu. I think he's been training for a few months, and there's a competition coming up, and his coach told him he should compete, but he's feeling he doesn't know if he should. And my advice is for new students is do all the competitions you can, because it's jiu-jitsu. Nobody's going to punch you in the face. You might win, you might lose, but you'll get some very valuable experience. What would you say to a fairly new student in that situation?
See, I think that as someone who's new, going out there with no expectations, no one, don't worry about winning. No one even cares if you win. You're just going out there, and they have that old saying that you learn more when you lose. You either win or you learn. Is that the saying? Something like that.
You win or you learn.
And so the reason is because when you lose, it gives you something to concentrate on. Okay, I'm not keeping my arms. I'm putting one arm out. They're triangling me. I'm sticking my neck out. They're guillotining me. You know what? And when you go out into a competition, then you get to see, it'll help. It'll make your jiu-jitsu better. And even if I competed in my very first tournament after only doing jiu-jitsu 4 months.
Okay.
So I competed in my first tournament after only doing 4 months, and I won. And I actually apologized to the people I beat. They were all 4-stripe white belts. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I didn't think I was going to win. I didn't sign up to take the medal from you. I signed up because I just wanted some experience. I said, really, I apologize.
That probably made them feel even worse.
Yeah, I know. But I kind of felt bad. These guys have been training. They're some of the people talking to you, before, the matches. Even a guy, at Master Worlds, I heard him say to one of the guys, he said, this guy's a 4-stripe purple belt. He says, yeah, my coach said that if I can just win one match, he'll make me a brown belt. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you were fighting me, I'd probably be hoping you would stay at a purple belt for another year, because sometimes I don't know. I mean, the coaches are just saying that to motivate them.
Yeah.
And maybe it motivates some people. For me, it's kind of like, well, okay, are you really going to give a guy a belt just because he won one match in a tournament?
Yeah.
What if he got Buchecha his first match?
I know, right? Again, there are some beasts out there, beasts that walk among us. Man, when I go to jiu-jitsu tournaments, and I started competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments after I retired from professional mixed martial arts, and so it was this big step down in intensity. It was like, okay, this is fun. Nobody's gonna punch me in the face. Nobody's gonna kick me in the head. There's no big adrenaline dump. It's like a drill at the gym. And so I went in there and I saw these guys, who'd never done MMA or kickboxing or anything, and they're shaking and they're nervous and they're
having
up.
an adrenaline dump.
And yeah, exactly. I'm like, man, what's wrong with them? And I realized, they haven't had that experience yet. And so that's one of the reasons I recommend this guy who asked that question, do all the tournaments you can, get that experience, because just more competition experience, more experience being in front of people, it's valuable.
You should always respect your opponent. You should always be a little bit nervous. There should always be a little bit of anxiety because, you want to perform at a certain level, but you shouldn't have those things keep you from competing.
Yeah.
And you need to just, sign up, go out there, do your best. Most coaches are not going to be that they want to see you compete. They're not going to base, what you did on how or how you're taught based on if you win or lose, because there's just too many variables. If you're swimming and you think you're going to win and Michael Phelps gets in the lane next to you, you're not going to win. I don't care how hard you train and how, but as a coach or as a professor, they watch you out there and it helps them. It helps them because they can say, you know what? maybe we need to work a little bit on this with our students. Maybe we'll work more on this with our students.
Yeah.
There's nothing but good that comes from competing.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. All right, Matt, I wish we could talk for another hour, but I got a date with my wife tonight. Thank you so much for coming out today, being on the podcast.
Tell Vanessa I said hi.
I will. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody at home, and listening for the audio listeners.
Yeah. Osa.
Yes, os and all that. I never say os, man. I never say os.
Oh, come on. It's the end of the podcast.
It is the end. Okay, you're a jiu-jitsu. I'll say os just this once, just for you, Matt.
Yeah.
But
I don't even know what it means. But all the Portuguese, all the Brazilians say it.
I know.
It's kind of a cool thing to say.
It's this big thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu culture, and I just never got into it.
We pat each other on the back. Os. Right?
Indeed.
It's cool. It's a cool thing.
All right, folks at home, thanks for watching. Get out there and train. Os.
Os.
Okay.
You do a good job of keeping